Comparing Early Native Americans of Pennsylvania. The Algonquin and Iroquois were the two largest groups of Native Americans in what is now Pennsylvania. Both groups planted the same crops: corn, beans, squash, and pumpkins. Both groups were hunter-gatherers as well as farmers. They both hunted animals, caught fish, and gathered wild plants for food. The Algonquin people relied more on hunting and gathering. The Iroquois relied more on farming. The Algonquin people often lived in villages near lakes or rivers. They built homes called wigwams. In the winter, they moved deeper into the forest to hunt animals. Men were the heads of Algonquin families. A child's main relatives were the father's family. Men made most decisions. Iroquois families lived in villages in the forest. Their homes were called longhouses, and many families lived in each longhouse. Women were the heads of Iroquois families. They owned the property and chose the leaders, who were men. So let's pause the video here, look back into the text, and I would like you on your whiteboard to compare and contrast the Algonquin group of Native Americans and the Iroquois group of Native Americans. So you want to make a T-chart. At the top of each of your T-chart column, you want to write Algonquin and Iroquois. And go ahead back into the text. Your teacher can help you. Reread, you'll reread it together, and then write different facts for each of the groups to compare them. So now we're going to apply what we wrote on our T-chart, and we're going to answer the following three questions. The first question: how were the food gathering methods of the Algonquin and the Iroquois the same? How were they different? So let's go back into the text. You can use your T-chart, and let's go into the section where they talked about food gathering. I remember this beginning part told me some of the crops that they would plant. And I'm going to look in this section right here. I see those words, hunter-gatherers and farmers. So this relates to food gathering methods. So go ahead back in there, look at your T-chart, and let's see if we can compare them. So I see the word both here. That lets me know that they do this the same. Both groups were hunter-gatherers as well as farmers. Both hunted animals, caught fish, and gathered wild plants for food. So this tells me how they were the same. Now, on contrast, how they were different, the Algonquin people relied more on hunting and gathering, where the Iroquois relied more on farming. So that's how I would look back in my text to compare and contrast the two Native American groups. Let's go down to question 2. Compare and contrast where the Algonquin and the Iroquois lived. So let's look back in our text. This entire paragraph here told me all about how they were gathering food. And I can see it's indented here. That lets me know this entire section is one main idea, which is talking about how they gathered their food and hunted. And if I look here, my second paragraph, I can see my topic sentence tells me exactly what I'm going to be reading about. The Algonquin people often lived in villages near lakes or rivers. So right here, that's going to help me with where they lived, right? So then after that, my topic sentence here, I know I'm going to have some details. So I know they lived near lakes or rivers, and they built homes called wigwams. And then they went into the forest to hunt deeper, moved into the forest to hunt animals. So that's how the Algonquin people lived. And let's go to now the Iroquois. So I'm looking here, this next paragraph, men were the heads of Algonquin families. So this paragraph and the paragraph before it still has to do with the Algonquin Native American group. But my question also asked about the Iroquois families. So I can see right here, I see the word Iroquois. I read my topic sentence. This is now telling me where they lived. So that topic sentence is giving me a clue of what I'm going to be reading about. So there's my topic sentence, and then here are my details. So they lived in the forest. Their homes were called longhouses, and each family lived in a longhouse. So now that's my difference. The Algonquin families lived in wigwams. Iroquois had longhouses. All right, let's go to number 3. Contrast the roles of men and women in the two Native American groups. So I look at that word roles there. I often think of the word role in this case. If you were to go see a play, each character has a specific role that they play. Well, in this case, I kind of think of the word roles as the jobs or responsibilities of the men and women in the two Native American groups. Now, already, I have my text mapped out in my mind again. Not to repeat it yet again, but I'm going to. This all talked about how they gathered their food by hunting or fishing or planting. I remembered that these 2 paragraphs were all about the Algonquin families, the first one being where they lived. So now I knew that this was going to be the paragraph about the roles of the men and women. And then this paragraph talked about how the Iroquois villages, where they lived, and I know this second paragraph is going to tell me about the roles of the men and women. So let's compare them and contrast them. The Algonquin families, the men were the heads of the household, where the Iroquois families, the women were the heads of the household. So that's how they are a little bit different. Here, the men made most of the decisions in the Algonquin families, and the main relatives were the father's family, where here, women were able to be in charge a little more and have property and choose their leaders, who were men, but they had a say. So that's how they were a little bit different. Thanks for learning with me today. Hopefully you learned some new information about these 2 Native American groups. When our video's over, maybe you can talk with the class about some interesting things that you found when reading this. Bye, everyone.